All right, so I just got done bagging up 7 bags of clay, okay? That's these bags down here, okay? There they are. Those bags of clay will sit for as long as I can. Ideally, I would allow those to sit for about 2 to 3 months. And what that does is that allows all of the organic material in the clay to form bonds with all the other clay, which causes it to be more elastic and more rubbery. Problem is I don't have that much clay and I don't have that much time. Usually it only sits for about 3, maybe 4 days tops, if possible. But normally it'll sit, you know, it might be next day that I'm making stuff or making stuff the day before that it gets used. You guys just use a lot of clay, which is good. It's not a bad thing. So this table here is made of plaster, okay? It's made of plaster Paris. There's 2 big chambers here, one here and one here. This allows me to put really soupy, soft, soggy clay that we can't use onto these, and then it absorbs the moisture and therefore it dries it out. And we want to control that drying process because we don't want to dry out too much on one area. If it does, then the clay is going to be hard in one area and then super soupy and soft on another, and that doesn't work. The plaster table here allows it to dry a little bit more evenly, and we can control it a little bit more. The problem is like right now after a batch, it's completely saturated, and if the humidity in the air is really high, then it doesn't dry out that quickly, and you know, it takes a little bit longer, and sometimes we have to use air drying as a process, but I'll go over that in a little bit. So what I'm going to do is show you the first step of recycling the clay, and that starts with these bags down here. These bags of clay are the bags of dried clay that you guys use in the classroom. You use the clay in the classroom, and when you put it back up on the front table, what happens is that the clay, some of the clay is still soft. Some of the clay is still perfectly usable, and that's what I usually bag up, and I'll pound it into a block, throw it in a bag, and I'll keep it, you know, sealed up for the next class to come in and use, or for the next day. The other stuff that's too firm, that's just a little bit too hard, you can't really do anything with it, you can't build with it, it's going to be too firm to, you know, to do anything. That's the stuff that I put into a separate bag, and that's the stuff that's on the floor between the table with all the clay on it and the extruder table, okay? And so from there, what we do is we then come over to this thing, and this is very simply a large Rubbermaid or plastic trash can. Okay, and as you can see inside, this is water and clay, and this clay is very, very soupy. Okay, so there's not much we can do about that, and it's going to be very difficult to do the rest of this video with my hand all covered in clay, but that's what happens. So what we've done is we've taken that hard clay, we put it in here and then cover it with water. I let it sit at least overnight, or usually like today is a Friday, so I'll let it sit over the weekend so that it has a full 3-4 days for it to reabsorb water. And if it's bone dry clay, it'll actually turn to a complete sludge. If it's clay that's a little bit on the leather hardy side or a little beyond leather hard, it may stay a little bit rubbery, but for the most part, it's gonna stay pretty firm. So this is what that looks like, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and set you guys up here. Okay, here's my bag thing. Grabbing a bag from that pile that I showed you, and that's what this is. Okay, now I saved these bags. These are the same bags that the clay comes in. All right, and usually what I'll do, the table's gonna shake a little bit as I move this around, okay, is if I can break this off. See, this clay is really firm, so it's not really usable, but I'll break it up, okay, and then I just throw it in here. Now, I usually try to tear it down into handful size pieces or smaller. If the clay is really firm and I can still get a wire tool through it, I'll take my wire tool and run that through a couple of times. And that's just so that I can break this up a little bit easier and make it smaller pieces. If there's smaller pieces, then the clay will absorb more water because there's more surface area for the clay, for the water to touch the clay, and therefore it absorbs it easier. Okay, so here I got my pieces. I break them all up into chunks, just like that. And then I just throw it in there. It doesn't really matter how it goes in. And if I do have some clay that's bone dry, usually it's clay that's been, you know, projects that have been broken up and all that kind of stuff, I'll just go ahead and throw those directly into the bucket here, or the big barrel. and it's a lot easier. So I'm gonna do that until I get clay that completely fills up my bucket. So right now, you can see a little bit here, it's on dry land. I'm gonna fill this entire thing. I'm not gonna necessarily show you guys that in real time, but I'll do a time lapse to show you guys that, me filling that up, and then I'll top it off with some water, and I'll go from there, and I'll touch base with you after that.